So, we are looking at conceptual dependency theory, which is basically a small set of actions which they have chosen, a set which contains actions like P trans, A trans, M trans, expel, ingest and so on, and some sort of causal relationship between things that we are trying to see essentially. So, in the last thing we saw was this sentence which says while going home I saw a frog, and we modeled it by saying that there are two events which are happening, that I am going home and I am seeing a frog. All this is happening in the past, and I saw the frog while I was going home essentially. So, these are the conceptual tenses that we can talk about, the past tense, future, transition, transition start, transition finish. So, notice this transition finish T f is what we used for modeling that I stopped smoking essentially in the past. So, P and T f together says that I stopped doing something. So, K is continuing interrogative or negative or potential or even timeless. So, if you wanted to model this, yesterday the boy in the chair hit the boy on the piano in the mouth in the park. So, as you can see, the basic high level conceptualization is the act of hitting, which we have not yet we have said that it is not a basic CD act, but we know that we can model hit, and we will see that a little bit later using propel and move and things like that. So, the high level act is that the boy hit the mouth essentially. Whose mouth? The mouth possessed by the other boy essentially. And where was this boy? The boy who was sitting next to the piano essentially. So, that takes care of this thing. Which boy hit the other boy? The boy who was sitting on the specific chair. So, because it says the chair and the piano, we use the term specific here essentially, and this whole event happened, the location of the event was in the park. So, again specific the park, and it all happened yesterday essentially. So, like we said, we want to separate action and state. We want to distinguish between verbs which are verbs in the language and state change which happens in conceptual world essentially. So, if you say something like you like books or you or books please me, which we will treat as equivalent, then essentially what you are saying is that when I do something with books, and it is not stated here what you do with books, then as a result of that you become pleased essentially, or you could model it as saying state change. Now, this is not like a model of something which is physical, which you can verify with the ground truth in some sense essentially. This is a kind of a model which is an approximation of how you represent and reason about things. So, there is no real way of verifying that this is indeed correct or meaningful, except if you can use it in a meaningful fashion. So, if you can use this kind of ways of representing things, and you can show that programs can now understand stories based on this kind of representation, then you have at least some justification for saying that okay, this is a good way of doing things. So, we can have thinking actions. So, preventing would basically mean that X does something, as a result of which Y cannot do something. So, instigating is the opposite of preventing, that you do something as a result of which Y does something. Hurting some. So, notice that some of these are states and some of these. So, these were one event resulting in another event, and what we have here is a event resulting in a state essentially. So, hurting somebody means doing something as a result of which the other person is hurt. Comforting somebody means doing something as a result of which the other person becomes comfortable. So, if you say I comforted John, then I did something so that John went into a state of being comfortable, or you might do something like I said something. So, we already have the word speak we could have used here, or P or M trans with the instrument of speak. So, I said some soothing words and I did some physical gentle contact, kind of patting the person, and this is what you might understand by how you comfort people. You say, oh, it's fine, tomorrow you will be well or something like that, and then pat somebody, trying to model something like that here. As a result of which, John went from a state of being upset to a state of being comfortable essentially. Or if you say that I comforted John by feeding him, then you transferred food towards John. As a result of which, John ate the food, ingested the food, as a result of which he became comfortable. Now, the word threaten can be represented as follows, that X communicates something, it is not stated what that something is, it is some event essentially, as a result of which Y comes to believe that conditionally in the future, CF stands for conditionally in the future, if Y does something, then X will do something, as a result of which Y will get hurt essentially, I think. So, what Y comes to believe is this whole thing. The object of Y's belief is that if Y does something, as a result of which X will do something, as a result of which Y will be in a state of being hurt essentially. And how did Y believe this? Because X communicated that to him. We have not stated that he communicated to Y, but that may or may not be explicit. You could model it explicitly if you wanted. So, here is a specific threat. I communicated that I will do something. So, I communicated this whole thing, that I will do something which I will call Y, as a result of which the nose which is possessed by him will go into a state of being broken essentially. And this communication was from me to him, as a result of which is here, he comes to believe this whole thing, that if he does something which we will call as X, then I will do this thing which I will call as Y, as a result of which his nose would be broken essentially. Or another explicit threat, I communicated to him that I will do something with the hammer in his direction, as a result of which he will get hurt. So, this the level of detail has changed as to what you will do essentially. So, advising, we have talked about advising sometime. John advised Mary to take an aspirin or something like that. So, this is the structure that one would create. So, if you say that John advised Mary to take aspirin, then essentially what you are saying is that if let us say this is John and he communicated to Mary that John believes this whole thing in red, that if Mary were to do something, in this case ingest an ice cream, sorry, ingest a aspirin conditionally in the future, then Mary would be, in this case it is pleased, but in the case of advising for aspirin, it could result in her getting into better health, which would result in her getting pleased essentially. So, basically communication advising says that you tell somebody that if you do this, then you will be better off or happy or whatever essentially. And you believe this whole thing essentially. So, X believes that if Y does this thing, then Y will be pleased. So, here is some advising on eating. So, this is an example from their book. I advised him to try the twice cooked pork. So, I communicated to him that I believe that if you ingest pork which is twice cooked, then he would be happy. So, just filling in some detail here. The ingesting is the, instead of do, we are saying ingest, and we have given an object which is the twice cooked pork essentially. Now, when you talk about liking something, so when you say I like ice cream essentially, there are two different levels at which you can try to model this. The first one on the top says that if x ingests ice cream, then in the future x becomes pleased. So, eating ice cream makes x happy essentially or pleased. The second one is that x thinks about it. So, that is the difference between this and this. He conceptualizes the same thing that we have here, that if x eats ice cream, then x will be happy. The same thing is here, that if x eats ice cream, then x will be happy. But now, this whole conceptual structure or conceptualization is an object of x's thinking essentially. So, when I say conceptualization, you can say thinking. So, the first one is simply capturing the fact that whenever x eats ice cream, x is happy. The second one captures the fact that x knows that in some sense, or x is thinking about or conceptualizes that if x eats ice cream, then x will be happy, and you can see there is a subtle difference between the two essentially. Now, if you look at the English word want, it has some 2 or 3 different senses, which we will see as we go along. One of them is that if x does something, for example, now, then y will be pleased essentially. I want you to sing a song or something like that. If I say, then this is a sense that I would be using this. If you want to say that I wanted it, then this same thing, that if x does something, I will be pleased. I thought about that in the past essentially. So, I conceptualize that in the past, that if with respect to that past, if in the future x does something, then I would be pleased essentially. So, if you want to say something like John wants it, but he does not realize it, then you can see that it is really the case that if John will get something, he will be happy, but he cannot conceptualize the fact that if he gets that, he will be happy essentially. So, both are true at the same time, that in some sense the speaker who is uttering the sentence that John wants it, but does not realize it, the speaker realizes that John wants it, which is the first part of this thing, and is connected using the logical and. The second part of the and is that John does not conceptualize that he would be happy if that thing were to happen, whatever. So, if he said something like he hit Bill's car, but he does not know it, then the first part of the conceptualization is saying that he in the past hit the car which was possessed by Bill. The second part says that he does not know that he hit the car which was possessed by Bill essentially. So, when you talk about remembering, I remember the time we ate oysters, then you are conceptualizing about the event. So, you are conceptualizing the time that we ate oysters, and an instrumental act for this is M-transing, mental transferring from the long term memory to the short conscious processor. This fact which is residing in my long term memory, I have brought it to my conscious processor, and that is how I will model the term remember essentially, that I bring it from my long term memory into my conscious processor. And the object of M-trans is this whole thing, that we are eating oysters essentially, and this was retrieved from the memory and brought it into something which is a cache, you might say, or something like that. So, many mental events of course, will be captured using M-trans. So, communicate is simply M-trans, saying or telling something is M-trans with the instrumental act of speaking words in the direction of the person. Perceiving is M-trans with the of something from the sense organ to the conscious processor, and there may be an corresponding instrumental attend act that we had seen earlier. Learning may be moving from conscious processor to immediate memory. This is just a way of modeling things essentially. When you say what did you learn, I mean Remembering, as we have already seen, is entrancing from long term memory to conscious processor. Forgetting is unable to bring it from long term memory to conscious processor. So, this C with a slash across it stands for that you cannot entrance it from your long term memory to conscious processor. Seeing can also be thought of as conceptualization. When I say I saw John eating soup, then I think about John eating soup by the instrumental act of entrancing this event of John eating soup from my eyes to my conscious processor, and the instrumental act for that is that I attend or look at my eyes. So, different versions, as I said there were 11 or 14 basic these things. One of them had attend with different instruments, and other had look at and listen or something like that essentially. So, the conceptualization basically is to ponder essentially that if X conceptualize something, then you can think of it as you are pondering about it essentially. So, with some small variations, when you talk about the word consider, then you bring the future into that in the future this you could be doing this. When you are talking about dreaming, then again you are conceptualizing, but while you are asleep, and when you are wondering, you are asking whether whatever you are thinking about, whether that can be true or not. So, there is a question mark at the end of that this thing. Love and hate are states essentially. So, again in the English language, love and hate are like verbs essentially, but conceptually they are not verbs at all, they are just states of being. And you can model love as saying that when X thinks about Y, for example, then X is in the state of being in love essentially. So, that is kind of a more faithful representation of the word love. Likewise, hate essentially, the only difference is he is in a different state. So, thinking has of course different senses. One way of thinking is that when I say that I think that John is a fool, then essentially I am saying that the conceptualization that John is a fool, which is represented by this vertical set of arrows between John and fool, this conceptualization is lying in my memory. So, the location is M, which is possessed by me. So, it is a memory possessed by me. So, that thing is stored in my memory essentially. So, when I say I believe that John is a fool or I think John is a fool, it is like saying that in my head that formula exists essentially. So, actions are the inputs to understanding. If you were to develop a software agent, if you were writing a game playing program for example, what does the program have to do? The software agent has to make sense of information coming in via the keyboard, assuming that you are the player is putting in the information via the keyboard or a stick, joystick or whatever. The agent has to make sense of those information, and that information is basically in terms of actions. So, goals and plans are not linguistic entities. We will talk about goals and plans separately, but whenever you are interacting with somebody, you try to think about their goals and plans. He is doing this because he wants to come and hit me, for example, he has a goal of hitting me, that kind of stuff. Instead, we will see that these are form of knowledge structures. They are not often stated explicitly, instead that what we see is a sequence of actions essentially. So, if you are designing a game playing agent, your keyboard strokes are the only actions that the agent can see. From that, the agent has to figure out what you are trying to do essentially. So, of course, you may think that you are shooting a gun or something like that, but that is only in your head essentially. And luckily for you, the agent is able to conform to your thoughts and produce visual images which correspond to that person dying or not dying or escaping or whatever the case is. But the agent can only see the actions essentially. So, what you see in the real world are only actions. What you can think about are plans and goals, and we will come to this a little bit later again. So, another sense of the word believes. So, if you say Fred believes John, or one sense of the word believes, then you can say that John has told something to Fred, which is the top half of this conceptualization, which says John entrances something, that red colored whatever that thing is, it is some event. John told Fred that Mary ate the cake or something like that. So, that whatever that event is. So, that has been told by John to Fred. This results in, so there is a causal connection between John telling entrancing this to Fred and the causal connection of Fred believing it. We saw that one sense of belief is that it lies in your memory essentially. So, that whatever that fact was told by Fred, John has in some sense faithfully put it in his memory. So, he believes it after that essentially. But it could also mean that in the sense of being agreeing with somebody. So, John told Fred, for example, as we saw in the last example, that Mary ate the cake, and it already exists in Fred's head that Mary ate the cake. So, John, he believes it, he believes what John is saying because he already knows that essentially. So, in that sense believes is in the sense of agreeing with somebody essentially. So, all these are issues which you have to tackle if you are talking about natural language parsing essentially. So, in the first sense when he believes it, in the sense that he learns it for the first time, he must put it into his memory sense. So, you can see that from reading from top to bottom, the topmost conceptualization says that John entranced something to Fred, as a result of which Fred started thinking about that thing, as a result of which he built a formula which corresponded to that thing and transferred it from his CP. So, John had transferred that formula to his CP, and Fred has taken it from the CP and put it in his immediate memory, as a result of which now it lies in his immediate memory essentially, and in that sense Fred believes John essentially. So, John told something which Fred actually actively put it in his memory. So, if you want to model inferences, then you can use mBuild, where the input is a set of formulas and the output is whatever you are inferring, and you can, because John, so he knows two facts, let us say that all men are mortal and Socrates is a man. From this he inferred that Socrates is mortal essentially. So, the two facts will come in his memory and then the new formula will be added to his memory. So, the physical actions that we are talking about in conceptual dependency are move, own body part, propel, something else, ingest, expel, p-trans and grasp. These are physical actions. They will have their own set of inferences that you can make with physical actions, because they are talking about physical things essentially. So, if p-trans happens, for example, you can infer that the object ceases to be at the origin location and exists at the destination location. So, John went to the canteen, then John is no longer here and also John is in the canteen essentially. Likewise, in A-trans, if I give you the book, then I do not have the book anymore, but you have the book essentially, but not in the case of M-trans essentially. So, if I tell you something, then I still have the formula and you also have the formula essentially, except you can sometimes model it that in the CP this does not hold true, that once CP transfers to immediate memory, then it loses it or something like that. So, if you want to say I walk to the cafeteria, then the key act is p-trans, that I p-trans myself towards the cafeteria, which is at the top of this thing. For this there was an instrumental act of moving, and the object of moving was my feet, which are possessed by me, and I just model it by saying I am moving my feet in the direction of the cafeteria. So, walking is p-transing, the high level thing is p-transing, but the instrumental act is moving essentially. If you say John threw a rock at Sam essentially. So, again throw can be modeled as p-trans in the air as a result by doing propel. So, John p-trans the rock towards Sam and the propel action was on the rock and in the air again towards Sam essentially. So, here we have used the word at, John threw a rock at Sam, but if we had something like John threw the pencil to Sam, then we should model it as abstract transfer of position. So, if you are giving the pencil to somebody, so at the top level action is A-trans, John A-trans the pencil to Sam, an instrumental act is the P-trans, which is that he moved the pencil from him to Sam, and the further instrumental act to P Trance is propel, that he threw the he propelled, he pushed the pencil in the air towards Sam essentially. So, this John hit Mary, we have been talking about this for a while. When you say hit, you really want to say that you are doing an act of propel, which is a CD theory act, towards the direction of Mary, and you are propelling something. It is not been said as to what is it that you are propelling. So, we have just marked it with an x. So, you are propelling x towards Mary, and that x and Mary came into physical contact essentially, as a result of which. If he had said John punched Mary, then you could have said he propelled his fist, which is the fist possessed by John, as you can see, towards the direction of Mary, and an instrumental act for propel was to move his fist towards Mary, and as a result of this propelling action, the fist, which was John's fist, and Mary came into physical contact essentially. So, there is some more violence between them. So, John hit Mary by throwing a stick at her essentially. So, it is very similar. You can see that John propelled something, as a result of which the stick and physical contact came into stick and Mary came into physical contact, except that when you talk about stick, now we are propelling the object stick, and then we know how to throw a stick, right. We move your hand and then you grasp it and then ungrasp it and then lead. So, all that is being modeled on the right hand side of the slide essentially. If you say a car hit Mary, so Mary not Mary's good day today, I think so. I think so. We can say that somebody was propelling the car, we do not know who, and the car and Mary came into physical contact essentially. So, we do not know who the agent of this, who the actor in this whole thing is. We do not want to model car as an actor most of the time, unless it is a movie or something. So, when you say I moved the table to the corner, now in the linguistically move sounds like the physical move, the CD act move that we are talking about, but that is not necessarily the case. When you say I moved the table to the corner, it is not necessary that I physically moved it. I mean, I could have said that okay, there were a whole set of people working, helping me arrange my room or something, we are going to have a party or something, and I told the workers to move it here, and then I would still say it by saying that I moved the table, even though I physically may not have moved it. So, a sentence like I moved the table to the corner should be again mapped as a state transition event, state change event, that I did something, I do not know what, I may have just spoken some words, but as a result of that the table ended up in the corner essentially. Here is some more complicated thing. I sliced the meat with a knife essentially. So, let me try and separate these parts here. So, essentially what you are saying is that I did something which is a move action, as a result of which the meat went from a state of being whole to the state of being sliced exactly. The rest of the series structure is trying to describe what do you mean by the word sliced essentially. So, the first thing you say is that you move your hand back and forth, this should come with the meaning of the word slice. So, when you look at this, you can imagine that you are constructing a dictionary of in a given language, where for every word. So, we saw advise, threaten and all these words, with those words a conceptual structure should be stored, a framework should be stored with empty slots. So, your task is to retrieve the appropriate structure and fill in the slots essentially. So, sliced, when you talk about sliced, then this whole structure will come into place because of slice. So, you move back and forth and your hand should contain a knife, because it is says here this thing, and you move it towards the direction of the meat, and the instrumental act for that is that you grasp the knife and in your hand essentially. Okay. I think I will not do this today. The word conceptual analysis that you see here is their word for parsing essentially. So, how do you parse sentence essentially, and this is a, I mean some people would call it semantic parsing, that how do you generate the semantic representation which underlies a given natural language sentence essentially. So, we will do that in the next class, but you can try to imagine that if you were to parse this sentence, I want to go to the park with the girl. We already know what we want, we know how to model, to go with we can model and so on and so forth. But as we will see in the next class, the with is a very ambiguous kind of a this thing, it can mean different things at different times. So, handling something like with is not such a straightforward this thing. So, first of all, what do you mean by this sentence? I want to go to the park with the girl essentially. I mean, is it that you want to go with the girl to the park, or does it mean that you want to go to the park where that girl is essentially? There are two different meanings, and the whole idea of semantic parsing or conceptual analysis is to arrive at a meaning essentially. We will see that it is there are times when you do not have enough information. For example, of the two meanings that I gave to you for this sentence, either one could be true essentially, but a program which is processing, if it can keep both in contention and resolve the ambiguity when some more information comes in, then that would be a good program essentially, I think. So, in the next class we will see how this analysis is done essentially, what is the process of creating the conceptual dependency representation for a given sentence.